Zocco's Modern Life. Zocco's Modern Life.
And welcome to the Zocco's Modern Life podcast. It's a brisk Wednesday here in Connecticut. It's around 11 o'clock, and I'm joined by Jordan Katz, one of my good friends. We always like to get into it and talk basketball. And now that we're not attending the same school, it's a little more difficult to do that. But during the greatest week in sports, I figured I'd give him a call, and we can go over some of the intriguing matchups we have in this year's NCAA Tournament. Jordan, I'll throw it to you. If you want to kind of pick a matchup, maybe the one that you like or find the toughest to pick, and then we'll kind of jump around. Which one really is like giving you trouble when filling out your bracket, at least for the first round?
Well, first off, Joey, thank you so much for having me. It's been a while since we spoke. Really missed our basketball conversation, so I'm really excited about today. I gotta be honest, probably the two hardest matchups in the first round are probably both in the South region. I think Utah, Stephen F. Austin, Georgetown, Eastern Washington are two really interesting matchups. You've got the 5 and 4 seeds in Utah and Georgetown that play defense, rebound the basketball, fundamentals. Those teams win games with their defense. And then you got Stephen F. Austin, Eastern Washington that blitz you up the floor. Both teams are top 10 in scoring. Both teams shoot the. That's an interesting contrast of styles in those two games. That's my personal favorite first-round matchups. I think those are going to be two terrific games. I'd probably say, though, the hardest game I've had to call in my bracket down the line is if Wisconsin met Arizona in the Elite Eight, because both teams are the same. They're the same team, John. They have two terrific starting fives. They're not very deep on the bench, but they win games with their length and their offensive execution. They're the same team. I think that's a ridiculously tough matchup to call.
Yeah, it's almost not fair. I struggle. I try to visualize it because, and I'll say this to kind of preface everything we're going to say. We know as much as you, as much as those guys on ESPN, as much as the person picking it based on mascots. It's hard enough, in a one and done tournament where even with a team like Kentucky, you expect them to make it to the Final Four just because that's what history says, and I like to, at least have some kind of something to go off of. But it's not even fair trying to pick between Wisconsin and Arizona, and I just wish they kind of put Arizona maybe over on the other side so I can have Arizona and Wisconsin, because Arizona's
they kind of had to do that. I think Wisconsin got the weakest one just by my math, which means Arizona is your strongest too. The oddest seeding for me is how Maryland winds up as the weakest 4. That doesn't make any sense. You're telling me that Maryland loses in their conference semifinal, to Michigan State, and Utah loses in their conference semifinal to Oregon.
Yeah.
And Georgetown loses in their conference semifinal. That's what I meant to say.
Georgetown,
We've got Georgetown as a better seed than Maryland.
Yeah,
that doesn't.
I actually like Maryland. Yeah, no, I totally agree, and that'll kind of take us back up there. I think it's a good place to start. We'll just go left side first, and we'll kind of go through some matchups. But you talked about the little gathering in the South between Utah and Stephen F. Austin and Georgetown and Eastern Washington. And that's one of the places where I could see the 12 versus 13 in the second round. And the only other place I really see that happening, the only other place I see that happening is Buffalo Valpo. And I really hope in the Midwest, and I really hope Maryland doesn't let that happen, because I really like this Maryland team. And I didn't, write it down that way, but I could see that happening.
That's a spot on, Joey. That's a spot on analysis by you, because Buffalo is probably the team that West Virginia wanted to see the least. They play fast, which aids to West Virginia because West Virginia presses for 40 minutes. But Buffalo doesn't turn the ball over, and Buffalo can score. And West Virginia goes through stretches during the year where they can't score the basketball. That's a really tough matchup for West Virginia. Valpo's going to have to defend. They have a really good defensive basketball team, but they're good on the interior. It's going to be tough on their guards to guard the triple-headed monster in the backcourt, which is led by freshman Melo Trimble, who is one of the most underrated players in the country, in my opinion.
Yeah, he's good.
So that's a very difficult game because I think Maryland just is a tough matchup for any team in the 13 or 12 region. The most interesting matchup for Kentucky going down the line is really that Maryland team. You talk about a way to beat the Wildcats. Yeah, you're going to have to shoot it well, but you got to have good guard play, and Maryland certainly got that.
Yeah, speaking of good guards, I would say Kentucky's toughest matchup would potentially be Wichita, who I love, and Fred VanVleet is my boy, and hopefully they don't, their draw isn't too bad. I think they get by Indiana. Indiana, you watch them sometimes and you just want to pull your hair out. Like they should be a lot better, especially at home. They should be a lot. They had a average year for a team that I thought was going to be a little better, and
I agree.
And they get a Wichita team that is got to be pissed off from last year when they had a very good chance to go very far, and then they don't even get to Northern Iowa in the Missouri Valley Conference tournament because they fall in the semifinals, so they don't even get that rematch with the two best teams in that conference. Playing again. So I have no doubt they get by Indiana. And then Kansas again I'll ask you this in a second too. The second round matchup I most want to see, Wichita, Kansas. Kansas is like one of those teams that should be like so good and shouldn't lose certain games. And, even just going back in past tournaments, I know that the teams are different a little bit, but, they just like lay an egg. Like they sometimes don't show up. And Wichita is a team that, not that people are sleeping on anymore, but I don't know if a lot of people watch them. I can tell you, a lot of people don't watch them. And so like, whenever I see them on TV, I like, Fred VanVleet, he's very good. And the way this goes is one player can do it. We saw last night for Ole Miss, that point guard,
Stephon Moody.
Oh my God!
Boy, he was tremendous. What a great way to start the tournament. That game was terrific.
Yep. So one person can do it. And in the first half, it was what's his name? Tyler
Hawes from BYU.
Hawes, yeah. Tyler Hawes on BYU. He was going nuts, and everyone cooled off for BYU in the second half. But unfortunately, he had a really good first half, and it didn't carry over. But so Wichita, Kansas, I hope that happens.
I have Wichita State in my Sweet 16, so I completely agree with you that is the matchup in the second round to watch out for.
Yep.
As far as the 7-2s go. Yeah, I have them in the Sweet 16. I completely agree that Kansas is that team that you look at and you just don't know. Kansas is very odd this year. Kansas should be so much better than they are, but they go through stretches where mentally they are out of basketball games, and that's very rare of a Bill Self team. Not to mention the fact that Perry Ellis, the engine that makes them go, is injured, really doesn't look right. And what would be his replacement, Cliff Alexander, is now suspended. So I completely agree that that's the team that I'm looking at and saying, that's the 2 seed where I could see them falling. My personal favorite potential second round matchup is whoever wins NC State and LSU against Villanova. I'm sorry. I don't care what anybody wants to tell me. I don't know what everybody sees in this Villanova team. I don't get it. Yeah, they've got good front court depth. Yeah, Archie Diaconell and Javon Pinkston have really led this team to an impressive season. But NC State and LSU are 2 very talented basketball teams that match up very well to Villanova. And terrific terrific guard play where they can teach their guards, and even though Nova's got front court depth, if NC State can push the floor and make that game up tempo, they could take down the Wildcats. Then you've got LSU, whose strength is right where Villanova's strength is, in the front court. Not only that, LSU's front court is probably pound for pound better between Morton and Mickey. So that's an incredibly interesting second-round matchup for me.
We talk about, Villanova, and I think that's another team that nobody's watched. I mean, their record is very good, and they play in a Big East that got 6 teams in, but that doesn't mean that conference is strong. That just means, they might have won some non-conference games and then beat up on each other, right? So I don't know how,
Absolutely.
Big East is Big East, and I think it's still carrying some of the name. I'll pour some out for the Big East, man. That conference tournament is nuts.
Listen, here's the deal with the Big East. The Big East and the Big 12 are going to do one of two things. They're either going to shock everybody,
right,
or they're going to fall flat on their face. The Big 12 in recent years has been a disaster in the NCAA tournament, an absolute disaster. Yet they continue to get either the most bids or tied for the most bids every single year.
Yep.
The Big East is not what it once was, yet it's still treated as a power conference. I don't get that. That hasn't made any sense to me. So they're either going to surprise at least all of us and make good runs, or they're going to do exactly what we think they're going to do and fall on their face. It'll be very interesting.
Yep, and Wichita was that 1 seed last year, kind of like Villanova, where no one really kind of knows what to expect, and they have a good record, but who did they play, and how are they going to fare against these teams, and blah blah blah. And I think that Villanova kind of got the Wichita treatment this year, where the committee didn't do them any favors. I mean, NC State is who I think is going to win that first game, but 8-9. Here, I'll get into the whole my theory with certain upsets in a minute. So I think NC State's going to win, and that's not a favor for Villanova. And then you got Northern Iowa, Michigan State, Virginia on the other side. I'm not a fan of Oklahoma, but we'll go to the East in a minute. So I think that the committee kind of gave them the Wichita treatment, where Wichita as a 1 seed got Kentucky as an 8 in the second round, and that ended up doing them in, even though Wichita had that game. But that's like not a they were. Was Wichita was like the number 2 or 3 1 seed last year. They weren't the number 1 overall. They weren't the last.
I'm not entirely sure. I think they might have been the number 1 overall. I think to be honest, my memory sort of hurting me here. But when you get that 1 seed that hasn't played anybody, you're absolutely right. That's the 1 seed that scares you. It's the 1 seed that hasn't had a great level of competition. And now they're going to go up against usually the 8-9 team, just like the 7-10 game. Usually the 8-9 game is a team that preseason had a lot of talent and just never quite put it together.
Yep.
And that's sort of NC State and LSU. Yeah, NC State wasn't really on people's radar at the start of the year, but they've got talent, and they are led by a terrific guard in Cap Barber. So that's a very interesting matchup.
Yeah, here. So I'm going to give you some numbers. And if you didn't see my post yesterday, which is now wrong because I said I had BYU advancing and beating Ole Miss, so that's good. I'm not even going to
That's okay. I did as well.
On today. So since 2009, and this is from ESPN, I don't know if it's on everybody, the little feed stats thing, but they're so cool. So I'm going to repeat them. But I did cite my sources. At least one number 2 seed has been eliminated by round 2 every year since 1997, except 2009. So 15, 16 years, right? Or 17, 18 years, all but one time has at least one number 2 seed lost by the second round. And I think that's, the biggest chance for that is Wichita over Kansas or Michigan State over Virginia.
Here's an underrated game while we're still on that. And excuse my cold because I am a little under the weather.
That's okay.
Davidson, Gonzaga. Here's why.
Think so?
If you're going to beat Gonzaga in the first couple rounds, if you're one of those teams that wants to take down Gonzaga, you have to push the floor. You have to make threes. That's Davidson's MO. Because Davidson will not match up with Gonzaga size-wise. It won't happen. But if Davidson can make a ton of threes and run the floor, that's a very bad matchup for Gonzaga. That is a team whose pace of play matches up so well to the Zags. I really like that matchup. I don't know if I'm going to be able to pull the trigger on it,
Right.
but watch out for that potential game.
And I think, looking for a team with one player that can do it is one, kind of good theory. And the other is a team that can just straight up make threes because, for example, like UC Irvine Louisville, which I did pull the trigger in my bracket going up on my site later today. Check that out. Besides the 7-6 Mamadou Ndiaye in the middle, I think I got that right, which is going to be so fun to watch. That team can just make threes. And I don't care if you have Montrezl Harrell. I don't care if you have Joel Embiid. I don't care if you have any of these guys, Jahlil Okafor. I don't care how big you are inside. If the other team's making threes, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how small or big you are. So, a team with one guy or a team that can just straight up make threes can kind of cancel out a lot of the difference. And really, the thing is, anybody can get hot, anybody can get cold. And we saw that with Duke in past years where they're a really good team when they're making their shots. That goes for anyone. Any team that's making their shots, they're a great
Duke
team.
is probably the one seed in this tournament that you look at and you just go, man, what do you do? Because as I tweeted out during the ACC semifinal that anybody that plays Duke for the rest of the year should watch one game tape, and it's the Notre Dame game of the ACC semifinal. That's the only game tape I'd watch because it's the exact blueprint on how to beat the Dukies. You single cover Jahlil, you say, here's 30 points, you man up Tyus Jones, you basically shadow him, and you make Quinn Cook the guy that's going to be like, you make Quinn Cook score 30. You really do. And I like Quinn Cook. He's done it. He's had a phenomenal year, but that's the guy that you've got to make beat you. You just tell Jahlil Okafor, we're not going to double you. Here's 30 points. Go ahead. Do it up. It's fine. We're going to knock down the guards because we know that's how you win. That's the blueprint.
The problem is, can do teams have the personnel to do that? And I mean, any team could do it, but you have to have the athletes on the perimeter to actually contest their shots. And I mean, Duke is one of those teams that they want you to double, they kick it around, and they make their threes, and it helps them make their threes. This is kind of the difference maker in from this year's Duke team to past years. Like, they finally have that big man where it takes attention away from their strongest thing, which I think might always be shooting threes. But they make you do what they want you to do. They want you to double so they get their threes, and now they have a guy that you have to double to get their threes. And so now
it's very interesting. And it's very interesting because even just a couple of years ago, you used to look at high seeds that shot a ton of threes and said, okay, this is a team that quote unquote lives by the three, dies by the three, and that's the team that you want to have eliminated in the first couple of rounds. Even Duke last year, I mean, if you get teams that live by the three and die by the three as high seeds, those are the teams that you want to eliminate. But it's very interesting because that's sort of the way that basketball is going. It's actually been more advantageous this year statistically to shoot threes on every possession than to shoot twos on every possession because the percentages are kind of close and match up. I think that, with the 20-foot three-point line and so many of these guys playing on, big-time circuits in high school, that's sort of an advantage to teams that like to shoot the three. I think it's a stylistic change in the game of college basketball. It's already hit the NBA. Everybody shoots threes to the NBA. If you don't shoot threes in the NBA, you're driving to the basket or posting up. There's no mid-range in the NBA.
Or you're not in the NBA much longer.
Right, and the college game is sort of moving towards that, where the mid-range is sort of becoming a lost art. And it's all about threes, outside of 20 feet and inside of 12.
Yep. And that is what I saw from Ole Miss a lot yesterday, which scares me. Is they, that's just kind of the first game we have to go off. But they were taking a lot of 18, 19-footers one step inside the three-point line, and they made them in the second half. But I'm like, what do you step back or drive? Like that's just like the way that, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, that's sort of the way everybody thinks now.
Don't take that shot.
And Joe, bringing this conversation a little full circle here, that's why Eastern Washington is so interesting to me in that game against Georgetown. Eastern Washington is basically the equivalent of Oregon football on the basketball court. If they take more than 20 seconds of the shot clock, that's impressive. You did your job defensively because that team moves the ball, they hawk threes, and then they run back down the court, get the ball again, and then sprint right back up the floor. That is, they are such an interesting basketball team. They have 3 double-digit scores, but their main scorer is Tyler Harvey, and he can really play. He's averaging, I believe, just under 23 points per game, and his percentages are good to match. I'm looking at them right now. 47% from the field, just under 43% from three. I mean, this kid can play.
Yeah.
This kid can really, and he plays 37 minutes a game. I mean, this team's got a lot of talent. I really like the Eagles.
Yeah, I mean, but at some point, you would expect Georgetown to stop this crap, and Devonta Smith-Rivera. You would expect that senior to be like, enough's enough, right? Like at some point, John Thompson III and
yeah, you'd expect that, but you know what? Right? Georgetown's actually just been getting some bad draws. I mean, they've just been getting draws that don't match up well to them. And another one of them is Eastern Washington. You gave a stat about the 2 seed, so I'll give you a stat here when you're filling out your brackets. In the last 4 years, it looks like, 5 if we include last year. I'm sorry about that. In the last 5 years, there have been at least 3 10-plus seeds, so at least 3 double-digit seeds to make the Sweet 16. So when you're filling out your bracket, you got to put a couple of those double-digit seeds in there because they're going to get there. It's just very hard.
Per year?
At least 3 per year in the last 5 years. It's just very hard to call the team that's going to be there. One of the teams that has had a lot of success is one of the playing game winners. You had Tennessee do it last year. I forget who did it a couple of years ago. There was a year when a Pac-12 team did it.
LaSalle did it 2 years ago.
And I think 3 years ago with the Pac-12 team.
Okay, yeah.
Maybe it was Washington. Maybe.
Might have been. Yeah, no,
I'm not entirely
I know that every year a play-in winner, wins more than just that game. So
yeah,
one.
And, I was kind of rooting for it to be BYU because I liked BYU. But listen, Ole Miss has a great chance to do it. They match up well with Xavier. And then they're the spitting image of Baylor. It's 2 similar styles. You rebound the basketball. You let your defense lead your offense in transition. Neither team shoots particularly great, so it might be an ugly basketball game, but rebounds are going to tell the difference. I think tonight's game is probably the most interesting one. Boise State is an experienced team, but Dayton's got that tournament experience, and Dayton really defends. They get up in you. Archie Miller has done a terrific job with that program. So you got to think Dayton, also playing at home, where they didn't lose all year, is probably the team that comes out of that game. And then you get Providence, who a lot of people like Providence. Providence is they're a little hot and cold for me, but Levante Henton is big time. I mean, if he makes a run this year and people get to see this kid on the national stage, this kid is big time. He can play. I like Dayton's defense in that game. And then, you might as well flip a coin to see which Oklahoma team shows up. So the playing games have a good shot this year again.
And that's why I've gone, Oklahoma, if I have this right. Well, yeah, I like Dayton as well. I think they're going to win tonight. But Oklahoma was a 5-12, and they blew it to North Dakota State last year. And, I'm going on history. It's a different team, and Oklahoma is better this year. But, yeah, they're very hot and cold, and, they have inconsistent play from their guards, and that just scared the hell out of me. And they get a team, talk about a team I don't think anybody wants to see in their matchup is Albany, who, scared the heck out of Florida last year, if I have that right. And, Florida, was a 1 seed and a heavily favored team that I picked a lot. And they gave Florida a run. They have given, let's see, I have it up here. They lost to Duke the year before that, and that was a close one. They're tested, man. They're like Dayton. And that's why I just picked Albany, because I think Dayton comes out of that anyway. And once they win today, I'll be able to
right. So
you're
going to take Dayton anyway, right? So if you're going to take Dayton anyway, why not take a swing and take Albany? I'm thinking, my buddy did this in the West region with Ole Miss or BYU. He was comfortable with both. So he went with Georgia State. And Georgia State, to me, is that 3-14 game that I don't think is going to be on everybody's radar. I think the game that's on everybody's radar is without a doubt Oklahoma Albany. I agree with you.
Yeah.
Just because you don't know what Oklahoma team shows up. And as much as Albany just looks clunky, they tend to play teams very well in the tournament. So I agree with you there. But Georgia State, this is a very solid basketball team. They really haven't played anyone. They got blown out by Iowa State. But this is a team that plays terrific defense, and they are led by R.J. Hunter and Ryan Harrow, who are two outstanding guards. So that's a team where you look in the first round and say, if they can play some defense on Baylor, and Baylor can miss some shots, they're going to have their guys going. They're going to have Harrow and Hunter going. Right? But if they get that, maybe they have a shot.
Yeah, right. And I did my, kind of bracket tips yesterday, which is always fun. But one of the hard tips I can give people that we already just mentioned quick, but one of the hard things to get in writing a tip is exactly that. So, a double-digit seed is going to do it, right? And if you're really not sold on Oklahoma, but you do really like Dayton, and you have Dayton in your Sweet 16, it kind of protects you to pick an upset the same way you were talking about, your friend really liking, let's say now, Ole Miss in the Sweet 16. That means that Baylor Georgia State winner is only like a point in most bracket things and really doesn't matter, because you have Ole Miss beating the winner of that game anyway. So that's places like that where you kind of protect yourself are good places to pick an upset. For example, I really like Northern Iowa, and I don't think they lose to Wyoming. This Wyoming team isn't as good as past years, and that's a team that kind of, for some reason, people aren't sold on Northern Iowa, and even on ESPN, and I think that's because they haven't seen them play. I only saw them once, and I saw them against Wichita, which is like the game you want to see them play. Conference team knows them well, but they're both good teams. And Northern Iowa looked really, really good. And they were on the road that game as well. The one I saw was at Wichita, and they held themselves together, and they battled on the road in a tough environment. So now put them in a neutral site, I think they're going to be fine. So all that to be said, I really like Northern Iowa in the Sweet 16. So that means that Louisville UC Irvine game, you can kind of pick an upset and not really lose your behind in your bracket. You can
for anyone that doesn't know about Northern Iowa, get to know Seth Tuttle. Seth Tuttle is great. I think you could argue that Seth Tuttle is the best player in that region. He is a multifaceted big man, can post you up, can stretch you out, and he's a great passer out of the post. I really like his game. I actually have Northern Iowa going a step further than you. I have Northern Iowa in my Elite Eight.
Oh, well, yeah, I do too. I have them against Virginia, and then, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a very good basketball team, and I think that we expect one of the mid-majors to make a run almost every year. You expect one of those teams to beat some of the top-tier teams and make a run and represent. And a lot of people think that might be Wichita State. But personally, I think that Northern Iowa has a better draw, so that I was able to pull the trigger there.
Basically, the better draw equals not having Kentucky in your region. Northern Iowa was very good. And I mean, that kind of, so, what I was going to say, so besides the whole protecting yourself with the upset thing, the whole double digit seed stat is very true and it's going to happen. You just don't know where, at least to a Sweet 16. But teams like Northern Iowa and Wichita are still kind of double digit seeds at heart. Like they're mid-major teams that are now getting the national recognition. But, let's say, for example, last year, or I think it might have been 2 years ago when Northern Iowa, it was a couple years ago, Northern Iowa beat that Kansas team. They were actually a double-digit seed. So, like, they still play, with, like, we have something to prove. And
I think I actually think they were an 8-9 game. I think that was a 9-1.
Okay,
if my memory serves me correctly.
Yep. It was a second round, right. The point of all that was I think a mid-major team like Wichita, Northern Iowa, and especially teams that are undervalued, overseeded. And there's a list of those like, I don't know if you know one off the top of your head, just one that got a bad seed, but is actually a better team or kind of plays.
I gotta be honest, that mid-major team that mid-major team that got a bad seed, but is actually a better team than their seed shows. We've said it for 10 minutes now. It's Wichita State. There's no reason why Wichita State shouldn't have been a 6 seed. And I kind of feel the same way about SMU. SMU is a 6 seed.
Yeah.
SMU is a better basketball team than Arkansas. And sorry, I don't care what everyone thinks about Arkansas being the second best team in a bad SEC. SMU is a great basketball team. Just watch the two of them play. SMU is better coached. SMU is better fundamentally, defensively. This is just a better basketball team, plain and simple.
I've only seen, so I slacked on my college basketball in February, but I did see at the SMU UConn game, and I had to bring it up. Well, I'll stick to this. SMU, that interior passing killed UConn, and UConn's a small team to begin with, and they got into foul trouble early, and Bryma was on the bench, but that interior passing and that team as in exclamation points as you can. They, Nick Moore is awesome, so they have a great guard. And then that interior passing and that they play inside out and they play defense and they rebound and it's a team that you don't want to see in a one and done tournament. And they're definitely better than Arkansas, who I think it's Bobby Portis, who's like he's going to be a pro, right? Like he's their best player. But Arkansas in it.
But Michael Qualls, I think Qualls is a little overrated. Larry Brown's done a terrific job. With the Southern Methodist program, no question about it. And you're a big NBA guy, so could you imagine if that team had Emmanuel Mudiay and he didn't go overseas?
Oh my God!
That's a team that we're looking at in this tournament. That if they got a 5 or 4 with Emmanuel Mudiay, that's your 4, 5, 6 seed. That's Final Four now for sure.
Yep. Mudiay has, to go off on a little tangent, because I can do that, Mudiay has fallen off the map because he's, whether playing overseas or not, or he's hurt, but whatever, he, his name was mentioned last year. Yeah, he's going to SMU. He's like a top 5 pick, all that stuff. And then, it's February and March, and the kid can't get a mention except when he, on Twitter. Like, he came back from his injury and killed it that one game, and I wrote about it. And, that's it. Like he gets one mention a month.
He'll do well. He'll definitely do well in the pros. While we're on this tangent, before we come back, he'll do well in the pros. Brandon Jennings did this, and Brandon Jennings has had a very solid career. So I wouldn't be concerned from that standpoint. I think that it's interesting that we've got about 35 minutes, and we haven't talked about the best team in the tournament, and if anybody can beat them. And
let's do this. Here, give me which I'm guessing Kentucky's in it, and then we'll do Final Four and Champions thing. We'll start from the inside because we kind of touched on a lot of the matchups. We'll do Final Four, then we'll go back to Kentucky, and we'll figure out who the heck can beat them if we think they are going to lose, and then we'll keep going from there. So so my bracket will be up on the site at some point today when I'm done getting this pod up. And just for the record, I picked upsets because it's more fun. So I picked something. I don't know if it's actually going to happen, but it's a better talking point, especially for this. So,
for sure.
Your Final Four.
Well, as much as this pains me because I hate when I sort of go with the curve.
Mm-hmm.
I think that Kentucky for sure is in. We're just going to move past that. I think Virginia got a terrific draw. I honestly think that Virginia's hardest game is Michigan State in the second round, just because of the coaching. Nothing to do with the players. I think that Virginia matches up very well with Michigan State because they play the same style as Michigan State and they play it significantly better. But just because of Tom Izzo, you just don't know when he's going to be able to pull that magic. And that sort of scares me from Virginia. But I have Virginia in the Final Four coming out of the East. In the South, I have Duke, and I have Duke for two reasons. One, I'm incredibly stubborn. I had Duke I had Duke winning the national championship, not just at the start of the year. I had Duke winning the national championship 2 years ago when Tyus Jones and Julie Okafor announced that they were committing to Duke. I said that freshman year that they were winning the national championship. So I'm incredibly stubborn, but Iowa State is a bad matchup for them because Iowa State controls tempo and Iowa State is experienced. That is a bad matchup. Fred Hoiberg has his team in a great situation to make a run. Now, they had a great situation last year and didn't pull it off. Right. They're back again, and they have another great situation. So I have Duke out of the South, but Iowa State scares me. In the West, I think I've flipped on Wisconsin and Arizona about 6 times now, just because, again, they're the same basketball team. I'm taking Wisconsin because I believe that I believe that the X factor for me is that Bo Ryan's going to outcoach Sean Miller. And that's hard to say. Saying someone will outcoach Sean Miller, because I think Sean Miller is a terrific coach, one of the most underrated coaches in the country.
He is, yeah.
But I think that that's where I'll go. So I'll go Wisconsin playing Kentucky and Duke playing Virginia. The reason why I say that that's not uncommon is that is the most common Final Four on ESPN's brackets. So take that for what you will. I have Kentucky playing Duke, and because the best team suited to beat Kentucky is Kentucky's second unit, Kentucky.
So I'll do mine quick. I circled some stuff to go back to, and then I want to talk about which I didn't mention yet. This will kind of segue us to Kentucky. I'll save it. Okay, so I have Kentucky. They're a Final Four lock. The past couple of years, the number 1 overall seed is gonna get to the Final Four. Wisconsin, Arizona isn't fair. It's no fun. It makes me wish the sweep was over. I have Arizona in this one because, honestly, again, I'm trying to protect myself. UNC Wisconsin scares me. Not that it should, really, but I think that could be a game where I think Wisconsin would much rather face Maryland, or would much rather face
interesting.
Louisville.
Maryland blew out Wisconsin earlier in the year.
I didn't know that.
I mean, it was at home, but they blew them out.
Yeah, and exactly. So, and what stuck in my head is seeing Wisconsin very recently, maybe last month or early this month, go through stretches at home against they're in the Big Ten, right? Against Big 10, Big 12. I don't care.
They're in the Big Ten.
They confuse the hell out of me. Okay. I've seen Wisconsin struggle to score, and they shouldn't. That should never, Kentucky never struggles to score, right? Because their defense, whatever, and Wisconsin's very good. And I honestly like Wisconsin in the Final Four. But again, I picked this to protect myself against UNC, where UNC is just long enough and they rebound just as well, and they're going to play defense.
There are a couple Elite Eight matchups where, you don't like to get hung up on location.
Right.
But location sometimes could be a difference maker. Just going back to one of your first round upsets, Louisville, UC Irvine, that game's in Seattle. That might as well be a home court advantage for UC Irvine.
Yeah.
I kind of agree that matchup is one to look at. But going back here, Midwest region, let's say Kentucky plays Notre Dame. That game's in Ohio. That's not a fun travel for Notre Dame. In the South, Houston is the location for Duke and potentially Iowa State. It's not a far travel for Iowa State. And now going to the matchup that you're talking about, Wisconsin and Arizona, that's in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is comfortable travel for the teams that are not on the one line, which is very interesting to me.
Right. That was my thing with saying I think Arizona and Gonzaga maybe should have been flipped, and they've done it. Arizona's the best 2 seed and the worst 1, but they don't always do that. And I know that they like to keep it that way, the S curve, but if Arizona does play Wisconsin in what's going to be basically a home game for the 2 seed, that doesn't,
I agree.
That doesn't seem fair, for whatever fair is. Now, Wisconsin, got the worst of the 1 seeds. Well, they did everything they could, and maybe they should have been in the South because, Duke, and this was mentioned on ESPN, and I'll finish my Final Four in a second. Duke was the only 1 seed who didn't win their regular season and conference tournament.
Yep.
Now, I get it. We're nitpicking, and the ACC is a very, very good conference, but,
Listen, I was stunned when the committee opted to put Duke on the one line instead of Arizona. They have always valued conference championships more than almost anything else. Than almost anything else you do during the season. But this was the time that they opted not to do it, and I found that very odd, which means one of 2 things. One, the committee is more sold on Duke than I am. Which,
that's going to be hard to do.
You could argue.
You're pretty sold on Duke.
or 2, they value the schedule more. And when you look throughout the bracket, you see that they really valued who you played this year. The only reason why Kansas is on the 2 line and Notre Dame is not is because of who Kansas played. Kansas scheduled themselves a tough schedule. And I think the committee really rewarded teams that went out and scheduled tough non-conference opponents.
Yeah. I mean, that has to be what they were thinking. So in this one, I usually have Wisconsin. I'm a really big Wisconsin fan. Kentucky, Arizona. I like Virginia beating Northern Iowa. Virginia's good. Those 3 losses are against really, really good teams. They're a good team, and my thinking is if they get by Michigan State in that first weekend, that's another week for what's his name, the one that's hurt,
Justin Anderson.
Yeah, Justin Anderson's going to be back, and a whole nother week healthier by that second weekend. So I think then they get past Northern Iowa, and then I have Gonzaga. Now I might switch that because Davidson Gonzaga does scare me. Now that you mentioned that, I mean, any team that can shoot.
Listen, a lot of people like the Zags, and if you're a betting man,
they have good guards.
If you're a betting man, Gonzaga's going to do it eventually. Mark Few's going to put it together eventually, and they're going to do it eventually. And why not have it be the year when they play the team that is probably most susceptible to anybody beating them in the last 10 years, and that's Duke.
Right.
The thing with Gonzaga is so interesting because they have 2 7-footers, which, is a difficult matchup. And that makes them, tough team to beat. They're 10th in the country in points per game. They're the number 1 field goal shooting team. They're 6th in the country in assists. I don't really value assists that much. I think it's more me watching how you move the ball. But for what it is, they're 6th in the country in assists. And, oh, by the way, they rebound the basketball. And they can lock you down on defense. So they have it all. Kevin Pangos leads that team. Very interesting. But they are going to go as far as Kyle Wiltshire takes them. Kyle Wiltshire is their X factor. He is their best. He shoots over 50% from the field, over 45% from 3. However, sometimes he gets himself in foul trouble. Sometimes he takes dumb shots. If he's scoring, there's no reason why they can't represent the South region. No reason.
Yep. So then as you were talking for Gonzaga, I went check. Yep, they should be in the Final Four. Like that they have size, the guard, but of course this is Gonzaga, which then makes me pause. But yeah, I mean that'd be a great And again, that's one of those teams where they've been a high seed recently, but they haven't gotten out of their own way. And they were a team that was like a double-digit seed from a mid-major conference that had something to prove, and they still have something to prove. So that is what I'm talking about with a team that like feels like a double-digit seed, and Gonzaga's a very good team. I'm just saying, plays like a double-digit seed because of their conference and they have something to prove, right? So that kind of makeup of a team, they eventually have to get in there. So I have Kentucky and Arizona, Virginia, Gonzaga, and I think if Gonzaga gets past Duke and Iowa State, I think they'll beat Virginia. I think Virginia, I think Gonzaga is a good matchup for Virginia in the sense that Virginia is going to have some trouble. And I think then it would be Arizona Gonzaga. And what about that final? Arizona beating Kentucky is just me having some fun thinking about Brandon Ashley being back and how good this Arizona team was last year with him. And this was the same, basically the same Arizona team that was undefeated before Brandon Ashley got hurt, and
right.
playing at that level again. And Kentucky at some point. So all right, I'll finish my thing and we'll go on Kentucky. That's good. Arizona Gonzaga in the final would be awesome, and I have Arizona. Going back to like they're good and they were they've been together and they should be.
Arizona would match up very well with Gonzaga because they can match with size and length, and they're just faster and probably more talented. So I like that matchup from Arizona's perspective.
Yeah, if it gets that far. For Kentucky, I'm torn because they're very good. But I don't care if they have 10 guys, you can only play 5. Okay, so that's the first thing. You're only like in the last 5 or 6 minutes of a game, you can have 20 All-Americans, I don't care. You have to play 5, and so does the other team, right? So against Arizona, and if any team can make it to the last 5-6 minutes of a game, I don't care how deep you are.
Especially because Kentucky hasn't played in that many close games, so I agree with that. Here's the problem. Kentucky's practices, from everything that people have been saying, are the most spirited, intense practices in college basketball right now, because every day is a competition. And when you've got 9 McDonald's All-Americans or 8 McDonald's All-Americans, whatever the number is, you can do that. And you can have every game be a competition, and you might not be playing the best team every night. But you know what? You might be playing the best team in the country in practice.
Yeah.
And if you're playing the best team in the country in practice, then there's not going to be a scenario that scares you.
Yep. So and we are talking about practice.
We are talking about practice. So I don't necessarily buy into the fact that Kentucky has to fall because they haven't played in a close game. They've been playing, tough competition every single day. Cal set it up perfectly. He has set this team up to say, hey, look, we're going to compete every single day. We're going to battle every single day because I know that my backup guys are better than your starters.
Yeah. I said this before, and I think you might have actually saw this tweet that I had, but I just wish Kentucky lost. Like, I think that's going to have such a big impact.
Yeah, I know a lot of people that feel that way. A lot of people that feel that way, which is
especially because it was hard enough to do it, when Indiana did it, in the 70s, I believe, and there wasn't social media. There was the fishbowl effect that a lot of people talk about, where you hear what's going on, you hear what's being said, and all it's going to take, and that's why Maryland is a little scary. If any team gets hot early and can keep it close in the last 10 minutes or 5 minutes, it's on that edge of getting away. A couple threes or a turnover to a dunk, and now Kentucky's down 5 with 5 to go, and if that's not pressure enough in the one and done tournament, now toss on we're undefeated, the undefeated season, blah blah blah, all this, right? Like So now it's double the amount of pressure. And of course, the Kentucky team is good enough to, say screw you and go 40-0. But they
I think two things with Kentucky. One, Kentucky is not only undefeated, not only the most talented team in the country, but they also have to be a matchup nightmare because of two players. One is the obvious Willie Cauley-Stein. When you're 7 foot and you can guard the other team's point guard off and down the floor for 25 to 30 minutes, you can't teach that. That is tremendous athleticism. My brother and I were talking about it. How has an NFL team not looked at this game and just said, okay, we're going to stick you a wide receiver and we're going to bring you in on 12 downs and you're going to catch 12 passes. Like, I don't know how an NFL team hasn't looked at this guy. He's got ridiculous athleticism for someone of his height and stature. That's one guy. The second guy that's actually a matchup nightmare, and people would expect me to say Carl Anthony Towns, but that's not who I'm going to say. The move that Cal made to put Trey Lyles at the 4 has benefited Kentucky immensely. Trey Lyles is now a matchup nightmare at the 4 because he's so much quicker than any of the other forwards.
Yeah, and I Kentucky, I couldn't stand to watch a lot of their games because it was almost like, they're good and this team doesn't really stand a chance. There were a couple of them I watched where I caught the end of the LSU game when the pressure kind of was starting. You're 20-something-0 and people are talking and, their next game is this, everyone's tuning in to see if they can stay undefeated. And, there were moments in that game where it looked like they were kind of done and they flipped the switch. And LSU's not, LSU's a 9 seed, right? So take that for what it's worth. I believe, was the game in LSU? I believe
it was.
Yeah. So then that's also a factor. But, Kentucky is basically at home unless they don't play, unless they play Notre Dame, who's been more at home. But Kentucky has a great following, and it's never going to be a road game in this tournament. I don't know. I said it before. If they had lost, I would feel a lot more confident picking them. And that's a lie because it's fun to do the brackets and always trying to find a way for someone else to win. But I would honestly feel a lot more confident. I just don't know. I hope Wisconsin gets them because that'd be a great game. And we can finally stop talking about if Wisconsin can beat them and we'll be able to see it. But so many people are picking Kentucky, and I think this is a good way to kind of wrap it up. So 50% of people, last time I checked on ESPN's bracket thing, have Kentucky.
I believe that was the stat.
Something crazy. And the odds are like 2 to 1.
I think they're down to even money actually.
Oh yeah, okay. But I mean, like 50, okay, so then not the odds. The analytical percentages that are coming out are Kentucky is like a 49% favorite, which is like double any other number 1 seed has ever been favored in the tournament. So like they're favored to win it. Like almost 50%. I was thinking about this, and it's hard to kind of do a written piece on it, but if you're doing like an office pool or a pool with, I don't know, 20 people, I think you almost have to pick Kentucky. Like unless you're going to pick
it's that old age question. Do you go aggressive in the tournament, and do you take the not obvious team, or do you play it safe in taking Kentucky all the way and get aggressive in other places and try to win your office pool that way?
Well, yeah, but all I'm and that works. Yes, that is usually the mentality. But this year is a very different situation because of how favored Kentucky is and how many people are picking Kentucky. Like even last year, I think it was Florida who I really liked, and they were the number 1 overall seed, but they were like 30% favored. And not nowhere close to 50% of people were picking them to go all the way. It was a little more open, and they were beatable compared to this year's team. But if half the people in your thing at least, because that's only half the people out of 3 billion, right? So who knows how many people in your 20-person office are taking Kentucky, right? So let's assume more than half are picking Kentucky. You almost have to pick them if you're trying to win some money, because if they do end up winning, you're even with all those people, right? You all had the same thing, and if they lose, then you're
still even with all those people.
Right. So you keep yourself even with more than half of the people, in a pool like that. Obviously, if you're doing it, against billions of people, I don't know what, the best way to go about that is. Probably take some chances, and that's the only way to win.
The question with Kentucky is probably one that won't be answered until the tournament, and that's the beauty of this tournament. The beauty of this tournament is you can do all this analysis, sit here and go game by game, and you can really know your stuff. But the minute you get into a one-game winner-take-all scenario in college basketball, you get some crazy things that happen. And the interesting thing about Kentucky is this. It's been a while, and I think you said this earlier, and you really hit the nail on the head when you did. It's been a while since Kentucky played a game where in the final 5 minutes, they were up 3, up 5, down 1, tied. If they do that against the better teams,
right,
can they make enough shots to win? Lord knows they can play enough defense. That's for sure. Lord knows they're going to rebound the basketball well enough. That's for sure.
Yep.
But can they make enough shots to win? And that's why I said very simply, I was talking to JP Lalamea, who's good friends with both of us. And that's why I said very simply, it's this. If Andrew and Aaron Harrison make shots, this team's perfect, undefeated, move on, see you later, let's not even play the games. If they don't make shots, now Kentucky's vulnerable. Now you get a team that can match up with them and that can take them down, because those guys are the way that they stretch the other team's defense and allow for their post players to have one-on-one matchups when they are making shots behind the arc. That's how their post players get one-on-one matchups. And then when you have to double down and you got shooters outside making shots, now the game's over. So if the Harrisons are making shots, Kentucky's got this thing in the bag. If they don't, we might see something crazy.
Yep, and let's just not forget, Wisconsin made a run last year, and they're always like that tournament team because they're so well coached, that is so well made for this tournament. And it took Kentucky last year some crap, some lucky stuff against Wichita to even get by them. Okay, Wichita had that game, and I went back to that before I even knew that was a potential matchup. Wichita was something like up 4 with a minute and a half to go, up 4 with 2 minutes to go, and they pulled it out thanks in large part to a Harrison, right? And then again in the Final Four against Wisconsin, Kentucky, again, another like a buzzer beater shot, whether it was at the buzzer or not, but a big clutch shot in the final minute by Andrew Harrison. Right? So it took that last year. This team's better. This Kentucky team is definitely better, but it took that last year. And if, it's as simple as, those shots kind of have a 50-50 chance of going in, probably a little less, but like this year, if those shots don't go in, right now it's a completely different, it's as simple as that. If they're in the same position and that shot doesn't go in, it's a completely different story.
Yeah. And you can say that about almost any team, but.
Oh, well, yeah, it does.
That's the beauty of March. The beauty of March is that, we can have these conversations and you can see how close some teams are. One bounce here or there, one missed shot here or there, and bang, your season's over. And it's so interesting with Kentucky because this is the best basketball team at this level that I've ever seen. No question about it. The last time a team started the year as the preseason 18 number 1. And ended the year as the preseason 18 number 1. And I believe the stat is they didn't relinquish it at any point in time.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure as well, because Kentucky.
And didn't relinquish it at any point in time. The last time you had a team do that was the 92 Duke Blue Devils with Christian Laettner. By the way, that 30 for 30 was phenomenal. I don't know if you saw it. I hate Christian Laettner, 30 for 30. Terrific. Anybody listening to this podcast that loves basketball, you have to watch that. But that Duke team was the last time A team was preseason number one, finished the season number one, didn't relinquish it anywhere in between. Duke won the national championship that year.
Wow. Yeah, everything's in Kentucky's favor, man, and it wouldn't surprise any of us if they win it. Before we do one,
but I don't think it would surprise any of us if they didn't. You know,
they didn't win it.
I think that's the beauty of March, and that's what makes this tournament and these 3 or 4 weeks my favorite weeks in sports.
Oh yeah, for sure. If Kentucky goes undefeated, y'all can look for it now. My tweet will be, great season Kentucky, last team to beat them, UConn. Now, we haven't talked about, I think, one of the other toughest matchups, and then we're going to wrap it up. We're running out of time. But Butler, Texas, in that Midwest is and I would love your opinion on this, especially just for my bracket. Forget everybody else. I'll maybe post this picture. I had Butler. I crossed it off last night and put Texas. Like, no, I need an 11 seed. Then I was waiting for BYU and they lost. So then I put Ole Miss in. I'm like, I think Ole Miss is kind of on a little run right now. Then I crossed off my Texas pick this morning and put back Butler. I've never done that before. I have two teams crossed off.
Here's the thing with that game.
Yep.
Grab a coin, flip it, and that'll tell you what Texas team shows up.
Yeah.
If the Texas team that had played close games in the Big 12, that beat Baylor, that beat West Virginia, if that team shows up, then Butler's not winning the game. But if the team that forgets how to play basketball shows up, then Butler's probably going to win. That's the hardest game for me in the first round, just from the sense of you don't really want to pick either team. Would rather just put Notre Dame in the Sweet 16 and just not pick that game.
But I think that's the problem. So a lot of these other tough matchups, like Utah, Stephen F. Austin, we don't. That game can only really affect you to the Sweet 16, right? We all think. I mean, I definitely think Duke is going to go to the Elite Eight from that top half. So messing up, those kind of 5-12, 4-13 down there in the South really isn't going to cost you your bracket, right? You're not going to lose a Final Four or an Elite Eight team. The problem with that, with Butler and Texas, and the winner probably getting Notre Dame, is any of those three teams can then beat Kansas. And Notre Dame is streaky enough where they've had terrible luck in the tournament, and I think they've gotten to one Sweet 16 in the past, 10 appearances, something crazy like that under Mike Breen, where they have, supposed to have gone far and haven't. And I don't care what they did in their conference tournament, even though they looked really, really good. History says on that conference tournament, stuff besides UConn. That's the biggest thing with this stat. Conference tournament stuff, if a team gets hot in the conference tournament, it usually doesn't roll over to the NCAA tournament. So take that with Notre Dame's history of not being able to, to make a run in an NCAA tournament anyway. It's reasonable to think Butler or Texas can beat Notre Dame, right? But the problem is, who do you pick? And then at that point, that kind of screws up your Sweet 16. And who knows? And that team could be the team in the Elite Eight. So
it's the beauty of March every year. Every year, you look at teams. If you follow along with bracketology and you look at teams that you're looking at in January and February and saying, okay, if this team gets a draw, I really like them. The beauty of March is that the committee finds a way to take that team that you really like and stick them with a bad draw. That team for me this year is Maryland. I think if I had flipped Maryland and Louisville, I probably would have had Maryland in my Final Four. For some people, that team is Notre Dame because Texas has more talent. Talent-wise, pound for pound, Texas has more talent. Pound for pound, talent-wise, Kansas has more talent. So it's very interesting, and that's what makes this tournament so great. It really is.
Yeah, I second all of that, and I can't wait for some Wichita, Kansas. I'm hoping Indiana doesn't decide to hit all their shots and Yogi Ferrell doesn't go nuts. So I think that's a great place to leave it. Anything else that we didn't touch on? I mean, we're almost out of time, but
I think we covered all our bases pretty well. Really enjoyed this. It's been a while since we got to talk basketball.
I know.
And it's a good thing that we got to talk in at this time of the year, because this is my favorite time of the year for sports. So
it is. It's definitely my favorite. And, the madness really starts tomorrow. I mean, I finally get to, go back to my normal life and put the bracket down and just kind of, go back to normal when the games start. And then that'll be fun. So Jordan, thank you so much. You can follow us at Zoc Modern Life. That's ZOC Modern Life. I'm at Joseph Zocco. Jordan, your Twitter?
At Jordan Katz 11.
Alrighty, that's KATZ 11.
That's correct.
Next time I have no idea what we're going to be doing. I am in the beginning stages of launching a new site once and for all. Jordan, you're obviously invited. We'll talk about this too.
I tell you what, we'll do something before the NFL mock draft.
Yeah, I'm in. Yeah,
that's sort of my go-to area. So let's do something before the mock draft.
Definitely. Yeah, he had a really cool idea to have people own, in quotes, a team and kind of make a pick for a team for the entire first round, and it's going really well. I'll throw that up on my website for anyone interested in my NFL draft stuff. I run it with my friend Mike Reynolds. The site is draftstock.net. And we constantly do mock drafts. We've got big boards up. We've got articles that are up. But yeah, this idea is really cool, and I'm looking forward to see how it pans out. Yeah, really good site for anything NFL draft. And I'll be doing, after this, I think I kind of go back into NBA mode for the next 2.5 months leading up to the NBA draft. So that's definitely next on my list. But Jordan, it's been real. Thanks a lot, and I'll talk to you soon.
No problem, man. Thanks for having me.
All right. Be good. See ya.
Bye.